Hello guys, in this video I'm going to talk about Netflix Hystrix. What is it? How can we use it in our microservices? As you know, microservices are distributed by nature, which makes responding to failures quite challenging. When you have like multiple microservices, multiple instances of those running, one of them fails, and how do you know which one failed? So imagine that you have two services like here, service B and service A. When service B calls service A, call to service B fails. How do you know it's actually service B, or is it actually service A that failed, but the exception got propagated to service B? So this is a simplistic scenario, but imagine like you have multiple services, one calling other, like a chain, service 1 calling service 2 calling service 3 calling service 4. In this chain, one of them fails. What do you do? So Hystrix is useful for these kind of situations. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So to deal with when the client service is when the client is calling some service, some other service, and the other service fails, what are our options? So there are four main options. By the way, I would recommend going through my blog. I have a blog post here, so it will help you if you go to the blog also. So there are four options we have in cases when the call fails. The first thing is client-side load balancing. I have a video on my channel. Please take a look. I'll link it in my description. And the next one is a circuit breaker. So what is circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is what is circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is basically like a electric circuit breaker. Basically, if a call from one service to the other service is taking too long, what Hystrix does is it will kill the call, so you don't exhaust the resources waiting for it. Or if a call is failing consistently, Hystrix will trip the circuit and prevents the future calls to that service instance. So you don't just call the failing instance anymore. At least for a while. It will keep checking, and if the instance is back, it will call again. But for just to test the basics. So in order to enable Hystrix, in order to do this, so let's go through. I have 3 applications running. One is actually Eureka, and I have a service B and service A, just like here in this picture, exactly same setup. So I'll show you what I have. This is my Eureka. It has 2 services, service A and service B. What we're going to do is we're going to make service B call service A, and then we're gonna add Hystrix to service B, to this service right here, and see multiple scenarios how we can use Hystrix. So first thing we're gonna do is let's go to the first thing you want to do is go to your bootstrap class in your client service, whichever service you're using to call the other service. Add this annotation, enable circuit breaker. This will enable the Hystrix in your project. Of course, you have to add the dependencies. There are 2 dependencies. These are the 2 dependencies. I'm using Gradle. And once you do that, the second step is basically you add this section here. You actually have a bean for REST template, and you add at load balanced annotation to that. So what it does is basically it's going to enable the ribbon for you. So that's the client side load balancing. The details are in my previous video. I'll add the link in the description. So once you do that, so this is the client. This is actually the class that is calling service A. As you can see, that's the service here. So in this one here, when you make a call to other service, you got to add two things. Actually, let's add these. You can add just the Hystrix command without adding any of these details. It'll still work. That is the circuit breaker. What it does is it will see the calls are taking too long, or the instances are failing. The calls are failing. It will prevent the future calls. So that's the basic version of it. But you have an option of actually adding a fallback method. What it does is once it notices problem with the call to other service, it will call the method that's in the fallback method here. So here, if you look at it, it's here. It's exactly the same thing. So the requirement for this is it has to be in the same class, and the signature has to match exactly, because the parameters for this, in this case, I do not have any parameters. In case if there are parameters, the signature has to match exactly the same, because they get passed to this fallback method. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that's the fallback. So we talked about the circuit breaker, which is the first one, without any details, any fallback method or thread pool key. The second strategy is a fallback method. Instead of just preventing the calls, it will call a backup method. And then the third one is bulkhead. Bulkhead is basically, Hystrix is going to use a separate thread pool to call this other service. So the benefit with that is if the calls are having an issue, the threads are from a separate, this thread pool right here, so they do not get propagated. The thread exhaustion does not get propagated to our application level, so they are contained within one single thread pool. So that's the benefit. That's why it's called bulkhead. So let's run this without. Let's run this. So basically, if everything works fine, and it should say, "Hey, I'm a service A. Congratulations, you contacted me through Eureka." So let's try it and run it. So that's that. No issues. Hystrix doesn't come into play now because there are no issues. Everything is going through fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to add. Right, this is the message you're seeing right now. This is service A. I'm going to uncomment this section. Actually, I'm going to add a delay of 3 seconds. So what happens is, because of the delay, I'm expecting Hystrix to call this fallback method, which is here, and it should say, this is to show how to do fallback and bulkhead with Hystrix. So it should call this method in this thread pool here. So now I added in service A, now I added this thread sleep for 3 seconds. That should kick in. Alright, now this is up. I'm going to run this again now. What it should do is it should actually, but I think the default is 1 second. If it takes more than 1 second, it goes to fallback. Of course, you can configure all these parameters, number of threads, how long it's going to take. There are multiple things you can do. Those are kind of out of scope for this video, but you can check them on a Spring Cloud site. Okay. So now I go here. Now you see this is to show how to do fallback and bulkhead with Hystrix. So this is the message coming from this fallback method. So to summarize, guys, we talked about client-side load balancing. We talked about circuit breaker. We talked about fallback, and we talked about bulkhead. These are the 4 main strategies when it comes to microservices to deal with when the calls fail to other microservices. I'm gonna add the video I talked about and my link to my blog post in the description below. Thank you. Bye.